quick recap of part one before we get into part two with my good friend Blake Yoon, former Mafia enforcer who grew up in a broken family, was a felon by age 11, locked up abroad in Panama, and jailed in the U.S. for over a decade by his early 30s, and can attest to the realness of movies like Goodfellas and Casino more than most. I was seeing this other side that really was and is fascinating on so many levels. And that's really when you and I became very good friends, watching you run your business, helping you run the business. You would come to my house and meet my family. I met your family many times. And that's the part I want to touch base on now, is that you are not like what most people would think with someone with everything that you just described. At least from my perspective. How do you take that?
Well, let me tell you something. I mean, I remember being in MCC in New York, and at that time, like I said, that commission case was exploding. This is 1986, and I mean, I like three of the five family bosses were in there. You know, caporagines, captains, lieutenants, soldiers. There were like hundreds of guys in there, and some were on the news every fucking day. And I'm sitting with these guys, you know, we're walking around in their underwear. So when you look at and because I didn't grow up in that in New York, but I got, you know, I jumped into it, you know, when I was suddenly, you know, and I was accepted in that circle immediately because of that instance that I told you about. I'm looking at these guys, and it's the same thing. It's like you can't judge a book by the cover, you know? I remember it says, this guy is this, that, and the other, and it's like, you know, you're reading about it, you know, and I mean, and they're like been around for like 70 years, and I mean, just the fucking best guys in the world, you know? And you know, so it is what it is. I mean, it's just,
well, here's
what somebody's a psychopath, or a sociopath, or a bad person, whether they're legit or illegit. That's the bottom line. I mean, you meet a lot of pieces of shit that, you know, that are legit guys. In fact, you know, I've been burned, you know, 100 times more by legit people than I ever been burned by guys that I was, you know, running around with. You know, the difference is I'll sue you or I'll fucking kill you, you know? So that's why people that's why people fuck each other so much in the legitimate world. I was a stand-up guy, and like I said, I mean, I would jump into dangerous situations, and I didn't mind going to battle. I didn't mind going to war because I liked that. You know, that was something. And a lot of times I didn't need to. And like I said, it wasn't like that was my source of income, and that's how I lived. I had a lot of shit going on back then, but you know, I was, you know, also, you know, I adopted that Napoleon, not complex, but the way Napoleon Bonaparte was so beloved by his soldiers, because he would run into the battle first. He wasn't in the background, you know, calling the shots. He would run into the battle first. And so, you know, I definitely adopted that approach with my crew.
Yeah, like when you would say just now as a stand-up guy, you're referring to a previous life that most of us cannot even relate to, wouldn't want to. The part I saw was in the business world, that stand-up guy, the moral compass. And there's two examples, and these are things that stayed with me forever, and why we're having this discussion now and stayed friends for 20 years. And I'll tell you both of them. One of them was you had a really successful business, you're making a ton of money, you ended up in a lawsuit, and it was with someone that everything was technically in your favor, but you felt that you had a verbal type of agreement with someone, and you chose to give up a lot of ground legally on paper because verbally you just felt that you had made certain commitments, and your word was always worth more to you than anything else, what you thought was the right thing to do. I remember that. And the other one is, I remember you and I sitting down one time where we were not entirely aligned on money and the bonus that I was due or not due. And this became another Blakeism. And again, it was 20 years ago, but I remember you actually said, okay, fine, here. And you gave me a bunch of money in an envelope, and you said, we'll go with that. And I remember saying, you know, but
I vaguely remember.
And I said, I remember sitting there, we were having coffee across the street from your North Hollywood office, and there was a big envelope with a lot of cash. And I said, you know, but so you agree? And you said, no, I don't agree. And you handed me the envelope. And I remember saying, but then if you don't agree with what I'm saying and you don't think you owe me the money, why are you giving me the cash? And you said to me, almost word for word, you said, Drew, in my previous life, when two people sit down and they disagree over money or anything important like this, it's in their best interest to agree when they get up and walk away. Because if you can't agree and you don't genuinely feel good like you're aligned, you're really concerned when you turn your back and walk away, like something might be coming at you. And I don't remember the exact words. You basically made it clear that like you grew up in this school of agree, work it out with your friends. And whether it meant that you were going to get to live or not, it was, in this case, a business thing. This is what friends do, what partners do. And I said, okay. And you said, so this time you get to be right. And I said, okay. I go, what happens next time we disagree? And you said, next time it's my turn to be right. That's what friends do. That's what partners do. And I remember saying, like, it's almost too basic.
I probably would have said, I got a marker. That's probably
a marker. That's
I don't remember
that's what you said to me
that's
2 years ago.
That's probably what I would have said. Yeah.
2 years ago, you said, I got a marker.
Well, you know, when you talk about that time getting fucked, it's been 500 times since, you know, I've been a legit guy, that I've been fucked by people that at one point in time I had to trust, because you can't be an island. Anytime you do business, you got to trust somebody, right? Otherwise, you know, you're a plumber and you only work for yourself with no employees and no sales staff. So, you know, then you don't got to rely on anybody.
You're just plunging your own shit.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, I'm sure I said something like that, and I kind of I vaguely remember that and I definitely, and I remember one thing, and that is that I didn't want you to go, but you know, there was an issue outside of me and you, and I remember that, and that was actually what caused me to realize I gotta walk away from a toxic situation. So that's what I did.
We had a problem with the same. We had a problem with the same person.
Yeah, I mean, but the reality was is that I knew that you worked hard. I may not have agreed with the dollar figure you came up with, because for me the way I did math didn't add up. But at the end of the day, you know, you gotta do the right thing. If you felt it was, you know, warranted, then okay, I'll meet you there. But you know, I got a marker the next time. So right. I actually don't even remember. I actually vaguely remember. I haven't thought about that, you know, prior to our talking today or years. I mean,
all this.
I mean, the last thing I remember is I mean, really what I remember about that period is what you ran and how well you ran it, and then that camera thing with Bo.
We got boned on that, man. We were idiots.
I forgot about that little conclusion chapter there. Until you just brought it up right now.
As I said, Blake, we're going to make a ton of money. We're going to sell digital video cameras that are going to be 5 megapixels. We're going to be ahead of the game. And you said, you think these things are really going to take off? I said, yeah. So you gave me $30,000 and I bought a shitload.
I did. I don't even remember.
And I
know I gave you money. I don't remember what it was.
30 grand. And then you said, take Bo, he'll help you sell. So we sat all Labor Day weekend at some outdoor convention. We sold 3. And then we sold the rest of them, true story, at a gay porn convention in the LA Convention Center, because it was pretty raucous, pretty wide open. And the crowd loved that they had a tripod. You could film yourself. And this was, you know, quite a few years ago. So that was innovative. And we sold all the rest of the cameras and at least covered our money back, and you got your money back. But that was an offshoot.
That would have been that 15 years ago.
yeah, that was the thing. But here's another Blakeism, and this is like the last one I wanted to make sure. Again, whether you remember it, if you don't, but it stood with me because these things help. Really, I mean, you think of things that shape someone's life, and a lot of the things I learned with you and watched the way that you did things was about, you know, being stand-up and your own moral compass, which we're going to talk more about in many ways. But I remember the topic of stress, and there was this little restaurant sandwich joint across the street from your office, and I came over to meet you one day, and I had a lot on my mind, and you said, how you doing? I said, I'm stressed. And you said, oh, you're stressed. And I said, yeah, the numbers were off, this. That's I'm stressed. And all of a sudden it became a Blakeism where you went, you're stressed, huh? So shit, it's a Blakeism coming on. This is going to be a, you know, back then. Now it's like a life story. And you kind of kept building, and you go, let me tell you something about stress, my friend. And you look at me and you go, have you ever sat in a courtroom next to a public defender who's half drunk, half sleeping, and you're looking at the judge, trying to read his lips, seeing if the next words are going to be triple life with no parole? And then you just stop and you're looking at me and you wait for me to answer. And eventually I'm like, no. You know, you're like, then you, my friend, don't know about stress. Order your lunch. You know? And I'm like, but I got to tell you something. And here's the thing, man. To this day, you know, I don't quote it, but we're living in COVID-19. The world's stressed. Everyone's stressed internally. Yeah. I'm sitting here now over the last month thinking to myself, you know, as the world's melting down, hey, man, there are people facing much more stressful stuff right now. Let's breathe.
Those people that got that shit that are having a hard time to take one breath right now, that's real stress, man.
Yeah.
And their family can't come around them. That's real stress. So there's a lot of people in that situation too, which is really sad.
So those became my Blakeisms.
That's a real stress.
Those became my Blakeisms over the years, and there's a ton of them. But when I reached out to you and said, "Hey, I want to play with this idea 100%," and you know, I said it's an idea I have. I think your story's too real and genuine not to tell. But let's take the moral compass back a second. And again, if there's anything you don't want to talk about, you'll say I don't want to talk about it. There was one thing in your life that you said you did in the line of work and business that you said you were ashamed about. You talked about it publicly in the past. And again, it goes back to your moral compass that I think is different than most of the people that were in organized crime, the mafia, where Sammy the Bro Gavano, it was almost like he thought his number count was great, the more people he killed. But you had some regrets about certain things specifically. You don't have to get into names, but do you want to talk about something in specific that you had a regret about that you didn't realize or you wish was different? That goes back to your moral compass about how you saw things versus other people might have.
Well, I mean, when you say moral compass, I mean, a lot of laws are bullshit, you know. It's like, you know, the lottery now. I mean, that's what guys were getting a lot of time for years and years, running a pick 3, you know, or marijuana. How much time guys got behind marijuana? I mean, it just goes on and on. So I pretty much, you know, I've always felt like supply and demand, and everything should be legal, you know. Everything should be legal. Nothing should be illegal. Insofar as consumption and taxing. 4 times I faced a life sentence, faced down a life sentence, and luckily none of them ended up, you know, becoming life or taking my life. But you know, that the one case that one of the reasons why I'm not enthusiastic about covering my past, even though, you know, there's been a lot of attempts, both with my ex-wife, my first wife, not my last, but with my first wife when things were current, and since then, even like with this, is that, you know, it's you know, you don't when you say moral compass, it's like you don't want to hurt people that don't have a compass. That's the bottom line. If you can break the law, and there's certain, you know, for me that, you know, there's no bad karma when you rip off a drug dealer. To me, that's not bad karma. Still robbing the guy. He's a drug dealer. So I have no regrets for all the drug dealers I've robbed since the time I was, you know, a teenager to the last time I did it. So, and then likewise goes for that kid that ratted me out, or you know the rules. You got to take your medicine. So, you know, and you live that life, shit can go down because of disagreements. And that's something when you asked me earlier about, you know, those movies. You know, it is. Well, a couple things. One of them is that, you know, most guys in that life aren't psychopaths, and when they do make a serious move, it's really, you know, thought out. Maybe not well thought out, but it's really thought out. It's, you know, it's gone over, and and there has to be like an intrinsic and an immediate threat, you know, and that's the only reason why you would go after somebody, and I mean go after somebody insofar as them, you know, being gone. But you know, obviously, if somebody is you got to strike while the iron's hot, or you know, if it's regarding a money issue or a business issue, then you got to move quickly because you know you're not going to get blood from a stone. So you know, if somebody's running out there with a big score and then they're spending it, you're going to end up with nothing, you know, and so you got to move quickly if it's financial. But on a very serious note, like those movies you're talking about in the life that I experienced, and that is that, you know, a lot of guys in that life are pretty decent. You know, a lot of them are. There are, you know, some psychopaths that kind of slip through, and you'll see that come out in them when things are going down, and so yeah, I mean, you know, there's when you say that there's something about my life, and I'm kind of hedging, is I don't feel comfortable talking about, you know, there's an individual that, you know, that I hurt very, very badly that I never would have, you know, if I had known the truth, you know, from the get-go going into it. So, you know, unfortunately, that's most synonymous with my name, and that's the you know, I don't know if it's the main reason, but it's yeah, I mean, it's the main reason that I'm not proud of my past, you know, definitely. I don't like being known for that. So,
And you refer to it without
yeah,
getting, not to get into details, but you refer to it as a square, someone who's not in that world, in the world of organized crimes, is a quote unquote square. And just in your moral compass, you would not intentionally ever
yeah.
square.
I tell people this that know me, that, you know, that ask like you do, and that is that, you know, that life, when you're in that life, you know, just like in the military, you know, there's guys that are running the IT in the SEALs, right? And there's guys that are flying the helicopters, and there's guys that are the mechanics for the helicopters, and then there's their lieutenant, and then there's the guy that's cleaning their equipment, and then there's the guys that are actually jumping off those helicopters and going and whacking Osama bin Laden, right? So it's the same thing in that life, and that is that, you know, there's rules of engagement, and those guys aren't going in there and killing his kids unless they come up with an AK-47 pointing in their face, right? So it's the same thing in that life too. It's you don't you know, you take pride in what you do, you make a living, good living with it. I mean, there's more than pride. There's huge fucking ego, man. You know, you get a lot of perks in that life. Like I said, I adopted that for, first until I was in my 30s. I'd rather live as a day as an eagle than a lifetime as a worm, and I was willing to roll the dice every single day. So, but there are rules because you gotta look in the mirror, and you gotta live with yourself. And
Yeah.
I was a kind of a weird combination because I was in two worlds. I was in the early cocaine period, smuggling, distribution, and then I was at the last hurrah of La Cosa Nostra in their heyday, and I ran in both those. And the other thing is that I was a big earner. Plus, I like to get my hands dirty. I like to had a Napoleon Bonaparte complex, not because I'm not short by any means, I'm not little by any means, but I like to lead my soldiers in a battle. So, that was probably the four things that are kind of unusual about my past. If I look back at it and talk about it right now, again, I don't think about it that much. And, to tell you, what was, a lot of people that have watched me, especially in law enforcement, since I've been legitimate, they wouldn't believe it, and of course they're not going to believe it because I have too rich of a criminal history, and so, but I can say the turning point was definitely that case in realizing that, I almost done a life sentence for something I never would have fucking done in my life, was one. The second one was
Where an innocent
that
person got hurt. That's what you mean, right? Yeah.
yeah, somebody that wasn't supposed to, yeah. And then the second one was that 6 months after I got pinched, my daughter was born. And I remember holding her, and this was MDC at Los Angeles. That's also the same thing as New York, but it's a federal holding facility in LA. I remember holding my daughter and saying to myself, if I ever get out, I'm never going to break the law to make a living again. And I kept that promise. When I got out, I just had to figure out a whole different approach. And I always had good work ethics, and I just, I always been kind of gifted with my math skills, so figured it out, man.
What's your daughter do today for a living? You don't have to get into names.
No, she's about to graduate from law school, and one of the top 5 law schools in the country, and she's already gotten placed, and she's going to be working with a nonprofit, and she could have gone out and made a bunch of money because they're recruiting in this school at really 6-figure salaries, between about 150,000 starting for their graduates, and she's taking less than half of that because she wants to work in criminal justice, and so
your baby,
a lot of travel experience.
Your baby, who you made that vow and said, "I'm going to live a good life because I have this baby." She just
I'm not a crier, but I read. She sent me, when she applied to law school, she had to put in a personal essay, and she sent me this thing, and I don't remember the last time I can have any idea when a tear rolled down my face, but I read it. I wasn't sad. I was so proud, because in that essay she writes that one of the reasons why, the main reason she wants to go to law school is because I had to sit down with her when she was just going through puberty, and she had this opinion of me as her father because I was really hands-on with her, and she doesn't remember because when I got out she was not yet 5, and so she doesn't remember me being away, and she talks about that I had to sit down with her and I told her everything about my past, and her opinion of me was shattered, that I was this person that had done this and that had this history. But then over the course of some years, her love for me never changed, but her opinion of me changed. And then over the course of some years, she realized that how close we were, and how dedicated to her I was, and how supportive of her that I was, not just financially, but also, in her developing to a strong young woman, and that everybody deserves another chance, including me, and that really had a huge impact on her, and now she's about to go into criminal defense. So, I mean, I had no idea that that's what she was going to end up doing, but I mean, I just think it's pretty interesting. And also, I'm obviously very proud.
And since I've known you, when you talk about your children and your kids and your family, again, that's something
my family right now, besides my kids, is only my mother, because other than that, again, it's, people will fuck you over, including your family, man, when it comes to money.
No, but
it's just my mother and my grandparents, my grandmothers that were alive. Yeah, of course, but they're dead now. But who's alive now? I give a fuck about everybody except my mother and my kids. Actually, I have some good cousins, but it's not like, they're around anymore.
Like 15 years ago, 4th of July, maybe it was 14 years ago, you say, you're coming down to the beach, we're going to hang out, you're going to bring your son, I'm excited, we're all heading down to the beach by me, and then it's 9, 10, 11, all of a sudden it's 2 o'clock, and you fucking show up, 2 o'clock, and I see you're moving like slower than a turtle or a snail, and you got like your little granny with you, and you're like bringing her down. I say, I wanted to bring my grandmother down. I mean,
she stayed with me for 13 plus years till she died. I never would have put her in an old person's home.
So
that's a fucked up thing too. Again, this is a straight world, man. The square world. They're like, they got a little bit of money, have the government pay, put them up in an old person's home. That's inhumane, So she stayed with me, and she slipped into serious dementia, but I never let her out of my sight, man.
Nope. You had a mobile home for her. You had everything. So I remember these are the things about, that are interesting. Yeah. And then, without getting into names, you have an ex-wife who, when we all hung out, she was getting into acting. And again,
no. She got into acting long before we met. She was, she started, moving up that Hollywood ladder, to, when you met. But no, she started in her country, but that was after we were married.
And now she's done okay. And then that kind of changed.
Yeah, so. A little bit. She did a little. She's done okay. I mean, she's not an A-lister, but she's just one rung below that. But I'm proud of her accomplishments, even though I got nothing to do with her anymore other than our son. But I'm definitely proud of her accomplishments. I know she gives me no credit, but that's okay. I don't need any credit. I'm still proud.
Yeah. Hey, man, did you ever worry in the back of your mind? And I guess people might watch this and say, "Where is he even speaking from?" Are you okay with us saying where you're at in general, or would you rather not even?
Yeah, I don't live in the U.S. anymore. I don't live in the U.S. anymore. I used to live in Havana. I'm done with America, man.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. I mean, I'll come back and visit. I don't think I'll ever own a home. I mean, I might move one of my yachts up from Mexico back to, a marina in the West Coast, San Diego or LA for a little time. But then, I mean, I just, there's nothing over there. There's nothing over there I haven't seen. And I'm at the age now where my ambition is not what it was, and, it's life keeps evolving. The older you get, the more you change your perspective of life in the world.
In the back of your mind, ever have any fear of payback, retribution? Someone's going to come up from behind?
Nah,
how come?
Not at all. Never.
Why not?
Because that's something that I don't know if you can. Let me think. If you watch movies, people might look at them movies and say, oh yeah, you got to worry about that. That's all bullshit, man. Unless even these guys, like you watch these reality mafia guys that end up, ratting on fucking all kinds of guys. And then they're in New York and you see them driving around with some, media person with a camera on them. They're like, oh, they're driving through, Little Italy. And they're saying, oh yeah, there's so-and-so, involved, and they're driving and like, they don't want anybody to see them. That's just because they're ashamed of themselves. They know that nobody's going to make a move on them. And the reality is that, people make moves on somebody when the iron is hot, it's like, it's because there's immediate repercussions or there's immediate benefit for somebody to be moved on. Because the reality of going after somebody, really going after somebody, if you're not, if that person is not in your hood, and they're not coming out of your house 2 blocks away every single day at the same time, it is a monumental job. The Mossad can do it. I'm sure, a lot of these government agencies that have unlimited budgets, but, regular people don't have that kind of resources. So absolutely not. And, and the only, of course, there's a few people that definitely would like to see me dead. There's no ways they can put their life on hold and put those kind of resources to figure it out. And that's even with me putting my address publicly somewhere, which I've had. I mean, I had my address was all over, my business address, my home address. That's the last thing. And then the other thing too is that, I don't know where I picked this one up, but I have my little metaphors. Another one I've said all the time is that, a coward will die 1,000 deaths. And how many people have you known that are fearful of, of a million things? I mean, of course, we don't want to run out into a big crowd right now with COVID-19, as infectious as it is, right? But at the same time, you shouldn't be petrified to where, you're not willing to leave your house and walk out and get some sun, get a little vitamin D. But, and it's like everything else is that, you can be petrified by fear. So there's a saying that goes, a coward will die 1,000 deaths, but a man can only die once. What does that mean? I mean, in your mind, you could be fearful so many times of like what you're asking me, But you know, if I were to go, it's not going to be from somebody chasing me down. You know, somebody that has a vendetta. It's going to be because I get hit by a fucking truck. You know, 100,000 times to one more possible chance. I mean, a trillion times to one more possible that I'm going to go down in an airplane, hit by a fucking truck, have a heart attack, than anybody coming after me. Now, if this was 30 years ago, yeah, almost 30 years ago, and, you know, it was the same group of guys I was running with all the time, you know, the guy that, you know, yeah, I mean, that can go around. You know, what goes around comes around. It could have happened to me, and I could have gone after somebody else because it was current. You know, it was current, and it was important. It was an emergency, and something's got to be done about it. But after time, no, nothing. You know,
how you doing?
I mean,
with lockdown, COVID-19. You and I spoke for a second the other day.
Fucking bother. Oh, it's nothing for me. I mean, it's even before COVID-19. I was talking to my mother by Skype the other day, and I was telling her that there was one time I was locked in the hole for a long time. Shoot, special housing unit, and she was getting upset because they're transferring me out of this one penitentiary to another, and they weren't gonna let me out in the yard until I was transferred, and it took a while. And so she's like, "Oh, you're still in the hole." I'm like, "Yeah." And she got worried about me, and I said, "Well, look in my eyes." I says, "Don't you see I'm okay? Stop worrying about it." And the reality is that even when you're in the hole, there's a lot you can do. I mean, it's really your mind, you know. You can read, you can exercise, you know. It's really all in your mind. So you can be locked down and panicked. You can go to have a job and panic and stress, or you can be locked down and be as free as you want to be, you know, as long as you have something to occupy your mind, whether you have books or you create something else in your mind and your body. And I raised my son saying strong mind, strong body, strong character. And you know, you have to have that balance. So it doesn't matter where you are. Absolutely doesn't matter where you are, as long as you find that balance. So I'm kind of like in that place now. First time since I've been locked down where I'm at, like, you know, it's easy also, you know, guys can get institutionalized that are locked down for a long time. And I was locked down over a decade of my life by the time I was in my early 30s. And so you see how, you know, and I didn't have a hard time. I had a really comfortable time, my years being locked down. I mean, I used to run, you know, all the gambling on the yard, and I had all kinds of, you know, benefits because inmates run shit in the state and the feds, you know. I just got done telling you, I didn't tell you who I was locked down with, but, you know, I was locked down with the most major guys in the, you know, the last hurrah of La Cosa Nostra. That's what I was down with, and Jews and Italians. And the other thing is that I'm Jewish, you know, so those were, you know.
Happy Passover. Happy Passover on that. Happy Passover.
Yeah, good Passover. And so, yeah, no, I mean, I don't remember what I was talking about. I forgot, but yeah,
about
being
lockdown.
locked down. Being locked down. It's
for
like
COVID-19.
I'm perfectly well. I'm not, you know, overly concerned about catching this disease. I live super healthy. I stay occupied physically, mentally, stimulating myself, and you know, there's a lot of beautiful women here. Still,
yeah,
you know?
the country. And you said the other day, you said to me, "Hey, lockdown. You know, I got Netflix and YouTube. Didn't have that the last time I was locked down." You said. So let me ask you one last question.
And my library.
And your library. So your lockdown
my
is
books.
approved for
I
sure.
get all my books.
Why did you agree to tell the story today with me? I think I have a sense of it, but it is something that's personal. And you know, why are we talking right now? Besides the fact that I asked you to do it as a friend and said I think this could be an interesting.
You know, there was only 2 times in my life where I thought about about talking about my past to the general public, but there's another time, and I'll explain all of them. There's another time that I gave a serious consideration to work with juvenile delinquents. So that was when I came out of the penitentiary last time, and And the first time, going back to the first time generally, was my wife was inundated. My daughter's mother was inundated with requests um, to converse and to get involved with me, and she was came to a point, I don't know, like after a year of fighting that case, where she convinced me to try and put something together for her and for my daughter that would have been in the six figures. And I spoke to one or some people, in particular, and I regretted that because they didn't do what they said they were going to do, which was bring a lot of money to the table, and it didn't go very far at all. And then the second time, generally, that this was brought up was actually with my daughter recently, and she's asked me to talk about my past, and the impetus behind that is that at some point in time, my kids are gonna have kids, and they got my last name, and what is on the internet, as years go on, there's more and more historical stuff that happened before the internet age that is coming up online, right? Besides the stuff that was in encyclopedias, Britannicas, news and history, besides the stuff that is taught in schools. And so I found some stuff in the internet that happened that, my life was things that happened in my life that were newsworthy way back when, in the 80s that are now on the internet. But the thing that is most synonymous with my name is something that I'm least proud of. So it does kind of, her argument does kind of make sense because, when you say you know me and you have an opinion of me, which isn't that I'm a complete piece of shit. And so it is kind of nice to be able to think about maybe saying my story from my point of view that then for the posterity of my kids and grandkids can look back and say, oh yeah, he did a bad thing, but in the end of the day, he wasn't that bad of a person. I mean, I wasn't that great, but I wasn't that horrible either. So that's the other reason. So, but the other one too is that, when I came out and you talked about that industry that I was in, I came out and I knew that, like I said, I had made a promise to myself and my daughter. I was going to go legit, and I knew I was going to do one of two things. And one was to get back into that modeling business because that was the only thing I had done. That was my cover. When I was smuggling keys, I had at the same time I was a fashion photographer for testing models, which is different than shooting campaigns.
And you were smuggling the drugs in the camera.
No, not at all. Not at all. But what I was doing was when I was traveling to Colombia and back and forth, I always had a really, really pretty girl that was going to be my girlfriend, whatever month that was, and who was a model. And I had my book and I had my equipment with me. I had my portfolio, my photography portfolio. So how that happened was that, I had met a photographer through some bartending friends of mine. So I was slinging. I was a bartender when I was 18 in San Francisco, and it was a super famous bar in San Francisco. And I was moving a lot of weight. Like by the time I quit, I was probably moving a key a week out of there. And
at the bar, so you're bartending, serving drinks.
No, through the owner of the bar. The owner of the bar.
You're moving drugs.
He was moving it. Okay. He was. I was supplying it. He was moving it. The owner of the bar, and I was a supplier. But so this was, I was working there. When I went to Miami, I was working there when I first went to Colombia, and then right after my second trip to Colombia, I stopped working there. And it's a great story because I just recently found this on the internet. Senator Dianne Feinstein was the mayor of San Francisco at the time, and the police went in plain clothes and held like dozens and dozens of patrons at gunpoint. There's a lot of attorneys used to hang out at this Fern bar. It's called Lord Jim's. And the owner, his name was a little Greek guy from South Africa, Spiro Temperantis. And they tried to bust him, and they knew he was moving a lot of dope. and they arrested a waitress that I had been with, and she had like a little white residue on her compact mirror. That was it. And I thought they had fired the police chief, but then I read the article like a year or two ago, so that they just it was a big it was a big ink on the crazy man or the cowboys of San Francisco police, but it just said that the mayor had moved them, like relocated the chief of police. And that was pretty hilarious to see. But the bar was famous, and so that was kind of funny. But anyway, so bartender at Lord Jim's with me while I was coming up. He was a model, heterosexual, and a friend of his was a guy by the name of Michael Almeida, and he was a fashion photographer. He did a lot of natural pictures, and the head fashion agency in San Francisco was Grimet. Jimmy Grimet was the owner. And so I had a 911, and this guy would just come from like Milan or Paris. He didn't have a car. He was sleeping in we all lived in the same apartment. There was two guys that lived together, and I had another apartment building on Jackson Street and Leavenworth in Russian Hill.
You had a Porsche 911. I got it. Okay.
Yeah, I had a 911. So this photographer, he's asked me, I'm shooting such and such a model. I said, listen, I'll be your assistant. He asked me if I had the assistant. He paid me. I said, no, you don't got to pay me. So I'll be your assistant, but you got to do two things. One, you got to teach me everything you know about photography. And I would drive him there and hold the reflective board, and he did everything on location. And then the second thing is you got to make sure that every model that we meet to shoot, you let them know that the Porsche is mine. And I'm like freaking 18 years old or something at the time. And then, a lot of these models are older than me. But somebody that came through at that time was Christy Turlington. She obviously became huge. She came out of Grimet's when Michael was shooting. Michael, was in there. And so when I came out the last time when I was in my 30s and my daughter was born, I knew I was going to do one of two things legit. And one of them was this is a whole nother conversation we can have another time. And that was I had a really well-developed plan for juveniles, going into the juvenile facilities. And I'd love to talk about this and working with these kids. And it was not a 12-step program, but it had nothing to do with God. It had to do with, being financially independent and setting your priorities right. And whether you're going to stay a criminal or not, but that, it really doesn't pay in the long run, So it was going to be either that or get back into the modeling business. And they end up in, what came up first was a modeling. And so that's why I ended up doing that. So it was just going to be one of those two things. But what was your fucking question, man? That brought me into that. What was your last question?
About why you agreed to talk today and tell the story. And I think a lot of it had to do with...
So it has to do with when I came out, that I would have been talking about my story, but only to a private audience of juvenile delinquents. And I knew that I would be able to have an effect on them. And I'll tell you why. Is because when I was locked up as prepubescent, there were two guys that came in, and this is before Scared Straight. You're too young to remember that, but that was.
I remember Scared Straight. I remember watching that as a kid.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, but when it came out, you would have been too young. So you probably thought after it had been out for 5 or 10 years or whatever. But anyways, before that came out, they had a couple of guys that came into where I was locked up as a juvenile. And I remember looking at both of them. One guy did like armed robberies, I don't know, like convenience stores, and the other guy had done a armored car. And obviously the armored car guy, I tipped my hat off to him when I was listening to the guy. And the first guy was like this, but even though first guy I realized right out the gate was a complete dumb shit. And it wasn't like they were trying to scare us, and I wouldn't have been scared anyway, even at that age. But I remember listening to these guys speak, and I remember thinking that I was smarter than them. And I know that all these fucking kids getting locked up think they're smarter than everybody else talking to them. And that's why they don't listen to nobody, So that's why I knew that I had something, because I knew that if I was that guy going in and speaking to myself, that I would have been able to reach me when I was 11 or 13 years old, which I think was the 2 years that they came in, and I watched and listened and was, participated in these meetings with these guys, trying to get us to go straight. So so that was the only time that I was eager to talk about my past, was for that, that goal in mind, and I knew that I could make a living with it.
So
Yeah, yeah. Before we close, I don't know if you want to put this in earlier, but there was a couple of people I said that I would talk about, and I definitely want to give them, put them on the record here. Whether you put it in or not is, it's entirely up to you. But and I said that, I already said Michael's name, Michael Franzese, and I have I met him in New York. We were both in MCC New York together, and we were in Otisville together. And then I bumped into him a couple times out here. I'm not out here, when I got out, and we were out together. And both times, I sat down with him and told him of my love for his father, and I mentioned his name because he's so out there on the media all the time. So,
yep.
I.
It's all over
So,
YouTube. Yep.
Yeah, well, every one of those Mafia shows you see him on there, but he's a good guy, and he has a good message, and he's always been a good guy. He was always very respectful. I remember right before I went to get sentenced by my judge in Brooklyn, Eastern District, he wished me luck. He was a sincere guy. He was young then. We were both young. How old was he in 1986? Who knows? But anyway, he was a good guy. When I first bumped into him in LA, he was a little jumpy, but then he realized that I had a lot of love for his dad. And when I was with his dad, I wasn't with him. We just crossed paths a few times when we were locked down. And he wasn't somebody, like I said, there were so many guys in there at that time, but he wasn't somebody that I knew well at all. We just had some passings, we had a couple of conversations, and that was it. But on my pod, on my tier, his dad was with me, and his dad was a freak for his age, and so far as strength, doing dips and push-ups and walking and this, that, and the other. And like I said, I told you that after that little incident, I was in on that crew. And the other thing too, by the way, I got to tell you, is that I was a kosher cook, and so I had to take this test, the Lubavitcher rabbi, to pass kosher. And so for years I was a kosher cook, and so we have our own budget. Yeah, in the penitentiary. So we have our own budget. So of course, I'm also bringing in the top foods that is not on the regular. It's kosher foods. It's a completely separate budget. So I used to break bread with all these, the guys that I was with. And like I said, I don't want to mention, some of them are dead, but, some of them are huge. Some of them are not, but they're all like, all made guys. And Michael was one of them. And his father was a highly respected guy. He just passed, 100 and something years old. And I haven't seen him since the 80s, but here's why he made such a big impact on me. And that was, I had that history as a child, as a juvenile delinquent. And then I had the history of being, pistolero, of being, a hammer, even when I didn't need to be, with my Colombian associates in Miami and Colombia. So I had that history. And then I went to prison in Panama. And there I didn't think I was coming out alive. And so when they pinched me in New York and I went to this place, for me it was like going into the Ritz-Carlton. The one thing that was, I knew I was looking at a lot of time, but I didn't give a fuck. That's just my personality at that time. And because the way I looked at it, I looked at the glass being half full, and that meaning that I got the 2 for 1. You understand? I got a 2-for-1. And that was before the sentencing guidelines. So the judge he could give me 0 time, and he could give me 15 years on 5 counts consecutive up to 75 years. But on that time, you're looking at like 5 years for the amount of weight. It was a few kilos. But, maybe, 5 or 10 years, and you would do between 1/3 to 2/3. This was before the sentencing guidelines that came in effect in '87. So, long story short is I'd eat with Sonny every night, and some other guys at that table. And we would be in our boxes, and we would do push-ups, and we would do dips. I worked all of them every day. But then the other thing is that about every 2 or 3 weeks, there would be some fucking hack that would get in my face and didn't give me respect because I was young, and I was, I was young, but I was, I was like 190 pounds. I was, I didn't look like a punk, but they would try and punk me. And I never let them punk me. And so I would have problems. It wouldn't be like I would strike them back, but I'd have problems, especially when they pat you down and talk shit. I would talk, Anyway, so I ended up in the hole quite a bit. And then finally, not finally, but pretty early on, Sonny pulled me aside, and he had really a huge, huge impact on me. And he talked some sense into me. He taught me how to do time. He taught me how to turn the other cheek. And that was something, too, that I found once I started knowing who these guys really were, that I started to really kind of step back and say, here are these guys that are fucking, the whole world thinks that they're so powerful, and they're so respectful, not only to inmates that deserve respect, but also to the hacks. And you would think that, they go in and they puff their chest up, and they're not. They're good guys, and, of course, when you have a problem, you deal with it accordingly. By that time, I was full of vim and vigor, and so I was like very combative with anybody that gave me any attitude, and I definitely wasn't scared of those hacks. And so, and plus, when I was in Panama, they used to, they hit you a lot with these urethane clubs, and so I mean, what they, them, cuffing you up and tightening the cuffs and manhandling you by your arms, or you talking shit to them, that meant nothing to me, and then they put you in the hole. But anyway, so Sonny really got me to do a 180, and he told me some incredible personal stories about, his wife. I don't know how many years back then. He had met his wife when he was in his 30s, and she was in her teens, and that would have been probably in the 40s. Who knows? I mean.
So you saw the power of someone. You saw the power of someone could influence.
No, it's not. Well, I saw that from watching the TV and reading Time magazine and Newsweek magazine with these guys that I'm locked down with, not because they're talking about their cases. Nobody's talking about their cases. Everybody knows who they are. But you watch the news and I'm with them. And then the guys that I'm running with, that I'm like, playing pool with, and the other, the guys that I'm housing with, they're soldiers.
I have no problem saying that you're a friend, a dear friend that I count on one hand. You're someone that I work with, CEOs, billionaires. A lot of them are great people. Some of them not so much. But if I was leaving my wallet in the room, you would be one of the people that I would never look twice at. So again, I'm not speaking to what's right or what's wrong. I'm saying that for me, the time that we've known each other, the past 20 years working together, being friends, watching everywhere that you go, the things that you have tried to do with your second chance at life have influenced me in a positive way. And I know that that's something that is on your heart, that you are trying to do the right thing, and you put your best foot forward a lot. And I think that says a lot about you. And your daughter graduating law school from the top 5 law school, I think is a wonderful testament to taking advantage of second chances, my friend.
All right, buddy. Have a good
day.
Stay
safe.